America remains tense and fiercely divided, with Donald Trump still claiming to have won the recent presidential election. Meanwhile, Joe Biden is preparing to enter the White House as his nation's 46th president. He's promised to reconcile and reunite America with a totally different style of politics from Donald Trump. He's also promising a different approach to foreign relations. And senior European leaders say they're looking forward to working with Joe Biden in a new spirit of cooperation. So on to the point, we ask, diplomacy post-Trump, will Joe Biden make the world a better place? Well, thanks so much for being with us. And my guests here in the studio are Staci Bivens from DW's US election team, who says Joe Biden must realize that America's allies are looking for a team player and not a team leader. Also with us is Jamie Fly from the German Marshall Fund, a former advisor on foreign policy to President George W. Bush, who argues that America will remain divided and distracted under President Biden, and that will harm its ability to partner with allies. And a very warm welcome too to Christoph von Marschall, chief diplomatic correspondent at the Berlin daily Tagesspiegel. He argues that under President Biden, relations with Germany and Europe might be a little less abrasive, but demands for greater commitment from Berlin and Brussels will remain. Well, thank you all three for being here today. There's plenty to talk about, so let's get going. Staci, is there any doubt in your mind that Joe Biden has won the presidential election?
Not at all. The numbers are just not in President Trump's favor, and I think he knows that. But as Maya Angelou said, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. And he was a sore winner, he was a sore leader, and now he is an extremely sore loser who is essentially spitting in the soup as he's leaving. The numbers just don't support him still being in office. And what he's doing is potentially detrimental.
Okay. Jamie, you are well connected in Republican circles. How would you gauge the mood among the party faithful?
I think it's mixed right now because we obviously have a Republican president who is not refusing to leave yet. He doesn't have to leave office until January 20th, but he's indicating that he perhaps thinks that he is going to serve another 4 years. So that's obviously very concerning, I think, even to many congressional Republicans. On the flip side, this is a president who did much better than anticipated and brought more than 72 million Americans out to vote for him, and honestly has charted, I think, a path forward for the Republican Party even in 4 years in terms of some electoral gains in key constituencies. And so that's why I think you see many congressional Republicans reluctant to push him out, because they think that Donald Trump is going to be part of the conversation for the next 4 years. Okay,
Christoph von Marschall, how much of a fresh start do you expect from Washington? Do you expect a transition or something much more profound, a transformation?
Well, I'm at the moment confident that Joe Biden will be inaugurated as the 46th president, but we are not yet out of the woods. And I think it's but it is somehow concerning and even dangerous that President Trump is not giving in, not admitting, and that sets a very bad example. It undermines institutions.
When you say dangerous?
The normal thing should be, as we have seen, for example, the transition from George W. Bush to Obama, from Obama to Donald Trump, that when the election result is clear, you invite your successor to come to the White House, you discuss what is, from your point of view, the situation and the most important problems. You allow your future companions to get the Secret Service briefings, to be informed. So you try to have a smooth transition in order to secure security of the United States and, in a broader sense, the democratic world. And that is missing. That is why it is dangerous. And that is just the side that this transition doesn't happen. But he also does damage to the institutions, because half of the population in the United States, or at least half of the voters, might believe him, that he considers himself to still be the elected president. And that undermines our belief in the democratic process, in the state of law, and in the division of power, which is the set what is different in our countries, Western countries, from dictatorships.
OK, that's the mood in Washington at the moment. For his part, President-elect Joe Biden has already been speaking to some world leaders. His message is unequivocal.
America's back. We're going to be back in the game. It's not American alone. Number one, I've had the opportunity to speak with now 6 world leaders, and the response has been very fulsome, energetic, and they're all looking forward to being able to, from Great Britain to France, to Germany, to Canada, et cetera, and Ireland. So I feel good about the ability to.
Stacey, America is back, says Joe Biden. Is that a boast, a threat, or a rallying call?
It kind of reminds me when Michael Jordan returned to basketball. I'm from Chicago.
That's interesting.
And so, you know, he was the best player in the league. And, you know, people admired his leadership and his fight. But when he came back to the team, people were a little bit weary. Things had moved on. He was gone for a bit playing baseball, and the team shifted. Some people had gone away. Some people had taken more of a leadership role. And all of a sudden, this great player returned.
So you're saying Joe Biden is already outdated and he hasn't even entered the White House?
I'm not saying he's outdated. What I'm saying is that the makeup of the landscape has changed, and so he wants to come back and be at the head of the table, is what he said. But when you listen to Angela Merkel saying that she wants Germany and Europe to work side by side with the United States, and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen saying that that Europe should take more initiative, I don't think that Europe now, the European Union, wants to be the Robin to America's Batman. I think that they want to be an equal partner in helping to reshape the world in order to try to shake off some of this Trumpism that's made its way overseas, and to try to strengthen the importance of multilateralism and these democratic institutions that the United States once supported.
Christoph, Joe Biden chose to speak to America's best friends, its transatlantic partners, in these early conversations that Joe Biden has been having. Is that how should I say? Is that playing it safe?
Well, it is a very different set of friends. If I take Great Britain, the United Kingdom, which means Boris Johnson, he rather betted on a re-election of Donald Trump and hoped for a good trade accord. And now he has to change to flip sides very quickly and say, you know, Joe Biden, I'm on your side. I want to be a good ally. That's a very different position from, let's say, France or Germany, who rather had a reluctant relationship with President Trump and were very much hoping that there comes change in the United States. If I look at my country, Germany, I think the biggest, not danger, but the biggest mistake would be that we again hope that the president changes and everything will be fine. We just can continue with our set of policies. And this would be a huge mistake. Of course, we expect that there comes change from Washington, but we also have to give some change from Berlin to make it work. And if we just think the change should come from Washington and we don't have to adapt or change, then we run into deep disappointment in a few months. So I hope that the German government has a plan what to offer to President Biden in order also to ask for some changes on the US side.
OK, we'll find out a little bit more about the plan in just a second. We just mentioned Chancellor Angela Merkel, and she this week reiterated the transatlantic partnership between the US and Europe is, as she put it, irreplaceable. She also listed the challenges that the partnership is facing. Here we go.
The United States of America and Germany, as part of the European Union, must stand together to meet the great challenges of our time. Side by side in the severe test of the coronavirus pandemic. Side by side in the fight against global warming and its global repercussions. In the fight against terrorism. Side by side for an open world economy and free trade. Because these are the foundations of our prosperity on both sides of the Atlantic.
JB Fly, Angela Merkel there talking about prosperity on both sides of the Atlantic. But let's be honest, America is frustrated with Germany. That is what we were just hearing. Tell us about the frustration, then we'll see what, Germany can possibly do.
I think the one lasting legacy of the Trump administration when it comes to Germany will be that he has shifted the U.S. conversation about what is expected of allies. And Germany has been perhaps the leading example at Trump rallies, receiving criticism from the president for not spending enough on defense, for being a free rider. And I honestly think that that's a good legacy for the relationship. I don't think Trump often approached the issue with the right tone, but I think Americans, given the pressures that existed even prior to the pandemic, want to see allies that are paying their fair share, that are stepping up and being partners, not just in word, but also in deed. And that's going to be a real test for the Biden administration. They want to repair relations, but I think the Biden team also wants to see Germany continue to make progress in defense spending on issues like Nord Stream 2 with Russia, doing more as the U.S. confronts China. And at some point, if Germany doesn't do enough, the Biden administration may end up being critical, just like the Trump administration was.
Well, not just like the Trump administration, because the Trump administration had no tact. They treated their friends like they were enemies, and that's a problem. So when you are trying to, he had more of an isolationist kind of view of the world anyway, and I feel, just listening to the way he spoke about Angela Merkel, that he has a problem with strong women. And so sometimes his policy, his rhetoric was more of an attack on her than on what the country should be doing. Of course, all the partnerships should contribute more, and in the way that the world is now, the United States can't carry the load. But you have to have tact, you have to be diplomatic, and you have to be respectful, because you need your friends in order to rally, in order to move the world forward.
Yeah, but I think we have to see the situation together with what is happening in Germany. And Angela Merkel has been chancellor for many years, and she is on the way out. Next year, we will have a new coalition. And if you read together the outcome of the US election and the German election, I think we can expect that the next government, which from today's perspective, talking, is probably green and black. It means the Christian Democratic Union with the chancellor and the Green Party. They will be more critical in the relationship with China, in the relationship with Russia. Certainly the Greens are not eager to spend more on defense. But here again, I think the perspective to discuss it as a way, what are the Americans expecting from us, is not the best way. We should say, what is in Germany's interest and what do our EU partners expect? What Trump, in not very good terms, threatened, and what Biden probably will ask for, is also the hope of France, of Poland, of the Baltic states, of the Netherlands, and our partners. In the defense issue, Germany is very much isolated. It's not just a US president who is asking that Germany should shoulder more responsibility. It's also a huge part of our European partners. And I think in order to convince the German public, that is a better way to have the debate. We shouldn't be in positions where we are close to a minority, and that is, for example, energy policy with Nord Stream 2, the pipeline with Russia. It is certainly defense, and there are a few other issues. And it would be, for that reason, it would be rather smart to come up with an offer. Yeah, we want to renegotiate Nord Stream 2 to make sure that Ukraine, Poland, they are not that they are not left out of the game. We are willing to do more in defense. We will not do 2% in the next year. Certainly not. That should be clear. But we are willing to do more. We are on the way. We have an offer in China, Russia, and so on.
Germany has indicated that they feel that they agree with you.
Yeah.
When the European Commission president was talking about Europe needs to take more initiative, I think that's what she's talking about, bringing more ideas to the table and not just being a passive partner, but being an active one.
You're absolutely right, Staci, but it should be more than lip service. If I now look, how do I make that happen in the German coalition government? The Social Democrats, a smaller partner, we all know that they are not eager to do that, what they are asked to do. So there is the willingness of the Chancellor and of the Minister of Defense, AKK, she was even more outspoken, but they have to make it happen. It's not just that you say we are willing.
So there is no political will, you don't think?
Let's bring Jamie in, because I'm interested. We heard that Joe Biden said America must lead. Lead in what direction?
I think Joe Biden wants to kind of reintegrate America into multilateral institutions. He wants to tackle global issues like climate change. His team also talks about picking up where the Trump administration left off on China and working more with allies. So these are all topics which I think there'll be a lot of heads nodding in Europe and here in Berlin in support of that sort of agenda. My question about setting aside the tactics, where I think President Trump often inserted himself unnecessarily into our allies' politics and made it difficult for them to work with us, Joe Biden will take a different approach. But Americans still want to see results. And that's the unfortunate, we had 8 years of the Obama administration. Obama was beloved in Berlin, greeted by the crowds of thousands of people at the Siegessäule, very close relationship with Chancellor Merkel. But he still privately criticized Germany and other allies as free riders. He was frustrated by the same things that President Trump was frustrated about. President Trump just vocalized those concerns and started to produce some results. And so I think the question is going to be, after a change in tone, will a Biden administration be able to produce results on any number of these issues? And I think that's what Americans across the political spectrum are going to be looking for, given that the Biden team seems convinced that this different approach will also be successful in producing results.
OK, so just as Joe Biden clearly and understandably believes that his primary domestic responsibility is protecting Americans from the corona pandemic, he apparently sees protecting the planet from global warming as his #1 foreign policy challenge. Here's an overview.
Biden wants to get serious on the very first day of his presidency and bring the USA back into the Paris Climate Action Agreement.
Climate change, climate warming, global warming is an existential threat to humanity. We have a moral obligation to deal with it. And we're told by all the leading scientists in the world we don't have much time.
Unlike Donald Trump, Joe Biden is a supporter of the Iran nuclear deal. The Democrat has hinted several times that he wants to re-enter the agreement from which Trump withdrew. On trade policy, Biden is likely to continue his confrontational stance with China in the hope that this will bring jobs back to the U.S. and boost domestic revenue. He is unlikely to lift the special tariffs immediately. What does Joe Biden's election victory mean for world politics?
Good question, big question, so much to talk about. Staci, before I came into the studio, I wrote down the conflicts that come to mind around the world at the moment. Afghanistan, Yemen, Ethiopia, Libya, Syria, Pakistan, Ukraine. I could go on.
Yes.
Yeah? Is Joe Biden going to make the world a safer place?
Well, I think that he's at least going to try. And I think that he's going to try by trying to work together with allies that Donald Trump pushed aside.
I think the challenge that Joe Biden's going to face is a similar challenge to the one that Barack Obama faced. He wanted to work with allies, he wanted to lead, but the American public is still in a disengagement mood. It's not just Trump voters that are less interested in what's going on in the world. If you looked at polling prior to the election, very few Americans were factoring in foreign policy when they went to the voting booth. And so I think he's going to not just need to reach out to allies, but also need to convince the American people that these are crises that require American leadership, especially when it requires some sort of economic or military commitment from the United States.
OK, we're talking about allies, and countries working together, nations working together. What about, what is Vladimir Putin going to be thinking as he looks on and sees all these events unfolding in the US at this point in time?
Biden is not a good message for Vladimir Putin, because Donald Trump was weak on Putin for reasons we don't totally know. Maybe
he thought Vladimir Putin was a terrific person.
Yeah, for example, these kind slogans. So it will be a harsher world for Vladimir Putin. But generally, I would say the conflicts you mentioned, I mean, whether Biden is a good president, we don't make that judgment whether there will be war in Syria in 5 years and in Libya or not. The more important question is, will the West, the old West, come together again and have a common interest and a common policy vis-à-vis China, vis-à-vis climate change, maybe also Iran, but that's already the second layer from my point of view. It is important, but the most important thing is unite domestically the American population and unite the West in a partnership, not in an American leadership with some followers. You are very right about that, Staci. And climate change is a good opener for the conversation, for example, for the Germans, but then more has to come, and we have to agree on a common approach to China, to climate change and to trade.
OK. Jamie, you have spent a lot of time in your life studying great power competition between the US on one hand and Russia and China on the other. How should Joe Biden stand up to Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping?
I think in both cases, honestly, despite the rhetoric you often heard from President Trump, his administration actually laid a path that Joe Biden can follow, both with Russia, where the U.S. reassured our Central European allies, deploying to help defend them from Russian aggression, and on China, laying out a strategy about how to deal with China's use of technology against the West and its efforts to infiltrate our democracies. I think Joe Biden will just want to pursue a different tone, will want to actually reach out and consult allies. But I don't think it's a significant course correction from where the U.S. was already headed under Donald Trump.
And to what extent is trade policy foreign policy, and to what extent are we going to see more trade war, more trade confrontation, or are we going to see some trade reconciliation and some jobs and growth creation?
I think there'll be an attempt from the Biden administration to pursue trade reconciliation, especially with the EU. However, the era of grand ambition in trade, I think, is gone for the foreseeable future. If you look at Joe Biden's platform, he's very clear that he's focused on shoring up the U.S. economy, on making sure that trade is fair, that it doesn't deprive Americans of jobs. And so in terms of transatlantic trade agenda, I think it's going to be a very minimal agenda focused on repairing some of the damage that Donald Trump did.
And we began with talking about climate change and that being very important on Joe Biden's agenda. He is also facing the challenge of bringing Americans together. That's a classic foreign policy field where Americans cannot agree, surely.
On climate change,
Yeah.
you mean? Well, I think that there are so many Americans, and I'm still puzzled by this, that don't believe that climate change is actually a thing. So I think part of his challenge is to try to explain to them what it is and how it affects them. And then also, if he can bring in more jobs, that maybe that will, even if you don't really care about the climate or the planet, which everybody should, maybe this will be an incentive for people to do so because they see that, oh, more of these jobs are coming into my area.
The hard thing about climate change will not to agree on a European-American agenda. That will be hard enough. But the real important challenge, or the important part, is to get China into a climate deal. China is the biggest polluter. If we let China out of the game, we can't do anything really important in climate change. So that will be the new challenge. And also there we need a common pressure from Europe and the United States together on China not to be climate neutral in 2060. That's far too late. They have to start now, and they have to get there in 2035.
The Chinese, when they see Joe Biden coming their way, do they think this is a tough guy or this is a pushover for us?
It is a polite but tough guy.
I think the Chinese would love to get the Biden administration wrapped up in 4 years of negotiations related to climate, because that's 4 years where the Biden administration will then not have the bandwidth to be talking about human rights abuses in Xinjiang, about Hong Kong, about Chinese technological infiltration of Western democracies.
Uyghurs.
So I think that's going to be, that could be an early tactic you see from Beijing to act like they're very interested in a climate discussion and kind of put out the bait for Joe Biden to take.
And to an extent, you are, in terms of a lot of the things you've done in your career, you're a bit of an insider. Do you have any clues for us about sort of where Joe Biden's going to go first, or who his Secretary of State is going to be? So clues as to where, you know, this is going in the next couple of weeks?
Well, we'll have to see whether they're concerned about a Republican Senate. If there's a Republican Senate, he has to keep his cabinet positions through that Senate, and so he might go with someone like Tony Blinken, his longtime foreign policy advisor, a Secretary of State who's seen as a rather centrist choice, who I think would get a lot of Republican support.
As you well know, just a word on what you expect immediately from Joe Biden, because he's dyed in the wool in terms of being a foreign policy expert. He was in the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee, I think, for 36 years, 12 years the chairman. Yeah, what's he going to do first?
I think the first thing he will do is open the arms towards Europeans. You are our old, trusted allies. He will send an envoy to Brussels, to Berlin, to Paris, as did Barack Obama with then Vice President Joe Biden in 2009 at the beginning. So that will be the first step. But then we have to follow up with substantial agreements. What are the priorities? And in the end, we might end up that our priorities both our priorities lie in Asia and how to handle China.
I think that's the way Biden sees it. I think he sees China as his #1 concern for the years to come.
Merkel might see it the same way.
Staci, is the question we asked is Joe Biden going to make the world a better, a safer place?
Well, he can't do any worse than Donald Trump, in my view.
We'll leave it at that. Thanks very much for joining us. I hope we've given you plenty of food for thought on on the way that American foreign policy is going to develop in the next couple of weeks and months. Bye-bye and tschüss.